Bet the board.
What do you mean you don't bet? I mean, I don't bet. You know, I don't gamble. I don't. I never have, and I never will. Yeah, right. I'll bet you $20 I can get you gambling before the end of the day.
You owe me 15 grand, pal.
Pay him. Pay that man his money.
It's the Bet the Board podcast.
God likes me. He really, really likes me.
In the end, I wound up right back where I started. I could still pick winners, and I could still make money for all kinds of people back home. And why mess up a good thing?
Here's Payne Insider and Todd Fuhrman.
Welcome into the Bet the Board podcast conference championship weekend. And then there were four teams left vying for the Lombardi Trophy, their place in football immortality, and 3 games remaining for all of our loyal Bet the Board listeners. I'm your host, Todd Fuhrman, joined as always by my esteemed colleague and co-host, the one, the only Payne Insider. And Payne, I know a lot of our listeners aren't thrilled to hear this, but for guys like us that have been grinding away since the draft in April and May, the light at the end of the tunnel is almost there, my friend.
I think they know by now.
Oh, they do. They do. That's why I say it tongue-in-cheek for them. They know that we've been ready to check out since the national championship in college football.
Still delivering elite content. Still trying to find a couple winners here and there. And last week, while there wasn't an official best bet, 3-0 on the old leans there. So hopefully you guys were able to shop around. It's always much more difficult to provide winners for others than win yourself, because it's got to be widely available. And if you're a professional bettor and you're in Vegas, or you're even in Florida, you had the Chiefs 3 flat, 3 minus 15. The rest of the world's dealing 2.5. It's mechanical, right? You don't need to be a rocket scientist here. You don't even really need to fully dig into the game at that point. If you can get 3 flat or 3 minus 15, and the market's dealing 2.6, just bet it and forget it. So hopefully we can uncover some things here with these 2 games. They should be great. The first one, a lot of intrigue. The second one,
Don't tell that to everybody out there. They're most intrigued for the Cinderella story and the Motown miracles that keep this train on the tracks against Mr. Relevant and Brock Purdy.
George Mason. Part 2, here we come.
I won't quite go that far. They did play on opening night, and they were division favorites. Not coming from the last 4 into the round.
I just meant the end result.
Yeah, true. There's no Tony Skin walking through that door anytime soon for Jim Larenega's George Mason Patriots. We'll put it that way. But before we get into the games, and we'll of course have a deep dive on both of those, tip our hand a little bit on some of the interesting player matchups we're looking for, metrics, how the markets have moved, some of the positions that we've taken and such. We've seen some of these NFL head coaching vacancies get filled. Brian Callahan takes the head coaching job in Tennessee. Some interested parties to get your take there. And of course, the big news that we anticipated once Michigan won the national championship, and some had insinuated was coming down the pipeline, Coach Jim Harbaugh back in the National Football League as head coach of the Los Angeles Chargers. Wanted to just get your quick thoughts on those 2 hires.
Boy, this is early for that. We have an off-season podcast. That's what that's for.
I mean, when you deal with people deal with people in Nashville, they want to know, Payne. They want to know it's Super Bowl or bust, given the fact that every other team in that division appears to have a franchise quarterback, and they're not even sure they hired the right head coach.
I don't even know who Brian Callahan is. Is he the son of the famous Callahan Auto Parts owner?
I mean, look, if he didn't sell out to Zelensky, there's a good chance that Callahan Auto can be right there at the top of the food chain when you go into an auto, You can go into Napa, or you go into some of the other auto parts stores that are out there.
I think what's interesting with Brian Callahan is he's not really from any specific coaching tree to where you could say, hey, right, that this lineage has a great track record for success. It's been really just mixed and match parts and pieces, right? He was under John Fox in Denver, who's a defensive-minded coach, was the QB coach in Detroit under Jim Caldwell, who we really respect as an offensive mind, and then he spent time with John Gruden in Oakland. And if Gruden was just a play caller and game planner, he's probably still a head coach in this league. And then you have Callahan under Zach Taylor from the inception of that new regime in Cincinnati, like 4 or 5 years, I think almost 5 seasons now. So I think I'm all for going with the young, innovative hire, right? Not a retread with little upside and a low ceiling, so you can feel good about potentially avoiding a catastrophe. But it goes back to what we said when Mike McCarthy was retained. There's not a lot of great candidates out there. And it's why certain guys are being retained. I obviously want to dig in more on Brian Callahan specifically. It just, at its core, feels like a large leap from an OC that didn't actually call plays for a Bengals offense that underachieved this season to suddenly becoming like one of 32 NFL head coaches. On the surface, would have preferred Ben Johnson just because he's actually calling plays for Detroit and he's responsible for the better unit on the Lions and he's helped repair Jared Goff. Like, there's specific things you can point to and clearly credit Ben Johnson for, where you can't quite do that with Brian Callahan. So we'll see what unfolds there. I don't want to go too far left, but my guess is if the Lions lose this weekend, by Monday you will hear Ben Johnson being the next coach of the Washington Commanders. We'll see if that comes to fruition. In terms of Harbaugh, it is what it is. We expected him to make this leap to the NFL. No better time when you can leave Michigan on a high note with a national title, and you feel like they're in decent hands with Sharon Moore, who
we think will get the job.
Showed well in his 3 games where Harbaugh was suspended, but the AFC West, just another hurdle for Patrick Mahomes to have to overcome. You look at the coaching in that division now. You have Reed, you have Harbaugh, you have Sean Payton, and then all of a sudden you got a middle linebacker as the fourth coach in the division. Hey, if he can somehow figure out how to gain 144 yards of offense for 3.5 quarters and win games as double-digit road underdogs, if you can make that predictive, then the Raiders are in good hands with Antonio Pierce.
Always interesting to see familiar faces in fresh places, or in the case of Coach Callahan, a guy that is going to have a lot to prove, and Tennessee Titans fans may or may not believe they have a franchise quarterback in Will Levis. The jury's still very much out there. We'll see what direction that organization goes in, knowing that the Houston Texans have C.J. Stroud. The Indianapolis Colts don't have enough of a sample size with Anthony Richardson, and you'd have to think that the Jaguars will make a lengthy commitment to Trevor Lawrence as their man under center as well.
Vrabel.
So
right? Vrabel feels like the likely candidate in Carolina.
Yep. I think that makes a whole lot of sense. I mean, although you look at all these organizations that are out there.
Your poker face, by the way, when I'm saying these things, I'm not seeing it, but I'm hearing it in your voice. It's not very good.
No, what I'm saying is I am skeptical of the Panthers organization from top to bottom. Is probably the least attractive of the jobs, knowing some of the ownership tendencies. And look, you're inheriting a quarterback that I'm not sure either of us necessarily believe can be a true franchise quarterback in Bryce Young. No draft capital. I think that becomes one of the more difficult jobs, even if that division from top to bottom gives you the most opportunity as it stands right now.
Yeah, completely agree. I just meant in terms of placing the chess pieces on the board. I would, make, without giving the entire world away, I would think Vrabel's the lead candidate in Carolina, and I would expect Ben Johnson to be the lead candidate for Washington. We'll see how this unfolds.
Hey, as the world turns, we know the NFL still plenty of things to get resolved for the 28 teams that are not playing this weekend, but there are 4 still vying for the title this season, and we can start, Payne, with the early game in Baltimore, where the Ravens will welcome in the Kansas City Chiefs, and they'll do so as a 4-point favorite, still plenty of 3.5s out in the market. Total in this game down a touch from where it opened at 46. Some shops as high as 48, into that 44.5 threshold. And the Ravens will host the AFC Championship for the first time in franchise history. Meanwhile, the Chiefs make their 6th straight conference championship appearance, the second longest streak all time behind the 2011 to 2018 New England Patriots, who appeared there in 8 straight. When you look at Andy Reid, 5-0 in the playoffs versus former assistant coaches. John Harbaugh was on his Eagles staff as an assistant under Andy Reid from 1999 to 2007. We know what the Ravens have accomplished this season. When they play good teams, they raise their level of play. The point differential speaks volumes. Wins 11 of them against teams with a winning record, and it's the best point differential at 202 of any team in NFL history, including the playoffs, to accomplish that. These two teams, though, both outstanding defensively. The Ravens allowing 16.5 points per game. The Chiefs at 17.3. Both can get after the quarterback, but they haven't played all that frequently. The last meeting between them, Payne, happened week 2 of the 2021 season, and a lot has changed since then. We'll hear plenty about Patrick Mahomes' sterling record as an underdog, specifically on the road. It hasn't happened often, but when it has, we've seen him go out there and exceed odds makers' expectations, much like he did last Sunday against the Buffalo Bills. Meanwhile, the Ravens, they've been good in a playoff setup, even better down the stretch, going 7-0, 6-1 against the spread. The final 7 games started by Lamar Jackson. That, of course, excludes the Week 18 game where Tyler Huntley got the nod. This game fascinating on a variety of fronts, so I feel it makes the most sense if we start with Patrick Mahomes and that Kansas City offense that showed some of that big play potential against Buffalo, against the Ravens defense that completely stymied and suffocated everyone's flavor of the week last Saturday in C.J. Stroud.
Yeah, I'll be honest with you. I was looking at a text message. I'm not sure where you led us there.
If you hit that mute button again over there, my Lord.
I did. Oh, man. And I was just talking to you. I said I'm not sure. I was being nice to you and muted while you were talking because I was.
We're trying to get you into postseason form.
A text message.
This muting stuff is preseason type gear when you've been off for 3 months and you're trying to find yourself into a rhythm.
Well, no. I had a text message on my other phone that was going off, so I decided to mute the mic and you, and that's all I was saying to you while you were actually on mute. So I didn't really say anything, but I didn't hear quite what you had asked me. My guess is you were asking me about the Chiefs' offense. I heard Mahomes mentioned in there somewhere.
We'll start with the Chiefs' offense against the Ravens' defense. I'm glad you've tuned me out in this relationship 10 years in.
It's, basketball season's here. I told myself I wasn't going to get involved. I'm not getting involved. Just getting some information. Oh, there you go.
There's the wave.
The Lions 40. There's the wave. Oof. Boy, oh boy. 52. 52. Guessing some positive signs there on Deebo Samuel. So I think what makes this such an interesting game to talk about, and we'll reel this in, Chiefs-Ravens, obviously, is eventually, whether you've listened to it like throughout the course of this week, like what you're going to hear leading up to the game, it's about Patrick Mahomes and Andy Reid. And how is it possible that those two gentlemen are more than a 3-point underdog? And I guess that's a fair assessment. But the reality is, if you just viewed these teams from an unbiased fashion on an Excel sheet, the real question is how could you not have wanted to lay 2.75 minus 140 at open, right? Soft 3 minus 150 minus 152 minus 165, 3 minus 20. 3 weeks ago, this line is Ravens minus 6.5. That's the reality of that. And there are guys behind the scenes that you will never know of, hear of, or see who have quietly been leaking, and maybe not so quietly now that you see 4s on the board, but how they've done it, just very, very quiet into the market. They've leaked this game because their lowest number on this game is Ravens 4.25 on a neutral. And it sounds nuts to say that, but it's what's transpiring behind the scenes. And I think there's a lot of guys, that probably share information with one another that might not be getting the full scope of who's on what and who's doing what. There's some very, very, very sharp money on Baltimore. And I think what we've been talking about, Todd, for the past couple of weeks is really playing out here. How do you gauge the Chiefs' offense? Do you truly believe it's been improved, right? All the changes that have been made, and there are some, so you have to make an adjustment for that. But do you believe those changes kind of catapult the Chiefs' offense being more towards its Super Bowl run self last season, or maybe a little bit lesser version of those historic Mahomes Chiefs offenses? And if that's your belief, you're going to perceive the Chiefs differently. And I think it makes a world of sense. Everything that we've been talking about for 3-4 weeks. So I know you don't want to sound repetitive, but the game is now in Mahomes' hands at the line of scrimmage. They're allowing him to kind of remove Matt Nagy more from the equation, and that's a positive. And you're getting to the line of scrimmage quicker, so defenses can't substitute. And you're allowing Mahomes to know the exact look and how to attack over and over and over. And effectively on offense, they're playing a three-man game where it's Rice, Kelsey, and Pacheco as the only weapons, and occasionally they're going to test early to see if MVS hands are working or if he's flipper hands, and they'll adapt and adjust from there if he's going to be like option 3.5. It's almost as if you have to create multiple numbers for this game. You're creating a range of what this line should be based upon the Chiefs offense, right? Like if you're at the low end of the range, you're using like the great Chiefs offense because you believe what's been going on for 3 weeks. The other end of that range is, the Chiefs defenses that they've played down the stretch weren't actually good or in good form, right? I mean, the Bengals defense, bottom 10 in the NFL, the Dolphins defense missing 6 starters, having to travel to a different time zone on a short week in freezing temps, right? The Bills defense was a shell of itself with injuries at linebacker and corner, and well, some of those guys did play. I mean, they were playing at like 65, 70%.
And on a short week their own right, playing with 2 days less rest.
Yeah, it was a terrible spot. I mean, effectively, Buffalo's playing 7 straight playoff games in as many weeks because they were all that vital. I mean, you think about just heading into the final Sunday of the season where the range of outcomes for Buffalo is like literally miss the playoffs or win the division. So they were playing 7 playoff games in as many weeks. The Steelers are utter dog shit relative to perception. Pro bettors are probably going to have the Steelers finishing somewhere in the power rating range of team 14 to 18, but everyone gave Buffalo a pass for winning that game. I mean, it's a 7-point game late, and Rudolph threw a pick in the end zone. Reality was the Steelers had a passing success rate 4% better against the Bills defense than their season-long average. An EPA per play better than their season-long average. And it was because of a lot of those injuries. Now, again, like we've been talking about these same teams for 3 or 4 weeks, so it's not going to be anything new, but you can still apply it and see if it works for the current matchup. There is a path for the Chiefs offense. There is, right? I mean, it's the run game with Pacheco. Now, I know he's not 100% healthy, but specifically inside zone. That was the area we thought the Texans could attack based upon the weakness of the Ravens, but they weren't very good in terms of efficiency doing that. Inside zone is the Chiefs' heaviest run type. They use it on over 30% of rushes. It's the league's 4th highest rate. The Ravens are 25th in EPA per rush allowed against inside zone. Will be even more effective using the inside zone from 3 wide sets. When passing, it makes sense for the Chiefs to use condensed, heavy personnel, similar to what they did against Buffalo last week. Use more 2 tight end sets. The Ravens defense, if you can believe this, 23rd in EPA per play allowed and 26th in yards per attempt defending throws from heavy sets. So that's the path. But it's finding needles in a haystack to some extent. And, are the Chiefs going to be spamming inside zone? Are they going to be as effective this week if Joe Thuney isn't there? And I understand Nick Allegretti is a fine backup, been in the Chiefs system for 5 seasons, has flashed in some spot duty. But when he had his largest sample of work in 2020 and 2022, it wasn't great. I mean, Joe Thuney's arguably the best guard in football. There is a drop-off regardless of what you think of Allegretti. If there wasn't, Allegretti would be starting, right? Generally speaking, the Ravens' interior of the defense with Kyle Hamilton is going to have an easier time defending Kelsey than the likes of Cincy and Miami and Buffalo in their current forms. The Ravens' defense has been fantastic defending short throws, which is where the Chiefs have been living. Unlike Buffalo last week, the Ravens crowd is going to actually force Mahomes and the Chiefs' offense to use silent count. And when you're operating and changing at the line of scrimmage like the Chiefs have been during this 3-game resurgence, it's going to be more difficult. So I don't expect to see the Chiefs' offense look like it did a week ago. I really don't.
Yeah, I think it's a leap of faith if we think that Kansas City is going to pick up right where they left off against a significantly healthier group. No rest advantage for Kansas City in this game, knowing that Baltimore played on Saturday. And Kansas City, it's one thing to play one road game. It's another to go back out on the road with the us against the world mentality against the side that really didn't have to push down the stretch to find a little bit of separation. But when you look at this Ravens defense, Payne, we know what some of the numbers suggest. The first team all time to lead or co-lead the regular season in scoring defense, sacks, and takeaways. Have only allowed 20-plus points once since Week 9, which was the overtime victory against the Los Angeles Rams. The pass defense has allowed a sub-75 pass rating on the season, holding opponents to less than 6 yards per attempt. You mentioned some of the vulnerabilities the Ravens have shown on the ground. When it comes to defending the pass, do you think we'll see anything unique from the Ravens to try and take away a Travis Kelce or take away Rashee Rice and force Mahomes to play left-handed in some capacity?
Yeah, you just stick Kyle Hamilton on Kelce. I mean, that's, remove one of the three parts from the equation.
Yep.
That's really the move, right? I mean, they've been very good defending short passes in general. Right, I think we've talked about Mike McDonald. He comes out and he uses light boxes. He very much is reliant on Roquan and Pierce in the middle to handle the run with 5 and 6. Now, eventually, if you have to make an adjustment and put another guy down there, that's when things could potentially open up for the Chiefs. But the way you throw on the Ravens is with heavy formations, is with play action. I didn't bring it up, but something we mentioned last week, right? This Ravens pass defense goes from elite to average when you use play action. I just didn't bring it up because the Chiefs don't seem to be throwing with play action. The few times they did last week, they absolutely torched the Bills. But Mahomes has been throwing play action like 16% of snaps this season. You're talking about, being in the bottom range of quarterbacks using that. So it didn't mention it because I don't really think it's part of the game plan. It's just not what they do. I mean, they use a ton of motion. They don't use play action because they think Mahomes is good enough to not need it. Maybe at some point in his career, he gets a little bit older, they'll use it a little bit more. But, I mean, there are certainly – every defense has chinks in the armor.
Yep. Do
you have the personnel? Do you have the formations? Are you going to be able to execute, right? There's also potentially some weather in this game. It looks like it was going to be completely clear like 36 hours ago. Now looking like light rain. Now, light rain and its impact is negligible a little bit, right? But it's like, you're talking about gusts now, not steady winds, but gusts like, 22, 23 miles per hour. So I would think that impacts the Chiefs offense a little bit more than it would, say, the Ravens offense. So,
well, you mentioned the Ravens offense, and you give us the perfect segue to go to that side of the ball. It's a team that's now scored 31-plus points in 7 straight home games. I mean, they finished the season as the number 1 most run-heavy offense in the league with a run-30, run-pass split. We saw that ground game on full display last weekend where they dominated the Texans with a plus 189 rushing yard differential. They can become the 3rd team to lead the NFL in rushing yards per game and win the Super Bowl. You look at the Chicago Bears in 1985 was the last team to accomplish that feat, but Lamar showed some of his maturation. They struggled mightily in the first half. D'Amico Ryans trying to heat up Lamar. You see him get the ball out of his hand much quicker with a lot of those zero blitz packages that were there, shaving a full second off of his time from snap to delivery. Kansas City defensively did a good job. They struggled a little bit with Josh Allen and his legs and an ability to extend plays. Yes, Allen and Lamar Jackson are both mobile quarterbacks, but they go about their business in very different ways, where Lamar's speed is his primary element, and Josh Allen can use that physicality. But when you look at the Kansas City Chiefs defense, L'Jarius Sneed and Trent McDuffie, outstanding corners. That matchup with McDuffie in the slot against Zay Flowers should be worth its weight in gold to try and watch. But this is a Baltimore offense that has shown some of that multiplicity this year with Todd Monken's offensive concepts. When you look at the matchup to watch here, how do you see things unfolding on this side?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's perception as well, on this side of the ball before we get to the matchups with, for those that like the Chiefs in the spot, right? In addition to the initial theory we discussed of like, Mahomes shouldn't be catching 3.5 points or more ever. The other side of that narrative seems to be backed by, playoff Lamar Jackson isn't good. And I left last week thinking something completely different. I mean, to me, a massive positive for the Ravens offense in Lamar Jackson. Had 20 days off. Monken, for some reason, decided he wasn't going to get Lamar in rhythm early. And they were snapping the ball under 5 seconds, under 3 seconds, under 1 second, virtually the entire first half. And at the same time, the Ravens offense and Lamar, to your point, got the massive curveball from D'Amico Ryans early in that game. I mean, Ryans has never been a high-pressure guy. Texans this season, 5th lowest blitz rate in the NFL. He sent blitz in the first half at Lamar on nearly 3/4 of offensive dropbacks. You think about that rate. It was 21% more than the most blitz-happy team in the NFL this season. That's Brian Flores' Vikings. So it was a complete wrinkle. Now, would I have expected Todd Monken and Lamar to adapt a little bit quicker? Yes. And you look at how that translates this week. Like, we all love Spags. I think he almost always has a great game plan, makes fantastic adjustments. You mentioned the horses in the secondary. They have those to contain the Ravens' pass catchers. We've seen some very sharp under money on Zay Flowers, under 4.5 receptions, to your point. But you start to look at some of the quarterbacks the Chiefs played down the stretch. Zappy, O'Connell, Browning, Easton Stick, whatever form Tua was in. Now, make no bones about it, right? Fantastic game plan against the Bills last week. That was, I think at this point, Bills fans are over it, but an absolute blowout. Don't let the final score fool you. Kansas City outgained the Bills by 3 yards per play. Every time the ball was snapped in that game, the Chiefs were a net positive, basically a touch more than 1/10 of a point per play. There were 125 total snaps in that game. It equates to the Chiefs being about 13.75 points better than the Bills in totality. So give the Chiefs credit. But specific to this week, right, there's advantages all over for the Ravens offense. Defensively, Kansas City struggles mightily with power run concepts. That's the Ravens' most used run type. Use it at the 3rd highest rate in the NFL. The Chiefs are 26th in EPA per rush allowed to those power run concepts. Ravens also use the highest rate of counter run concepts in the NFL at about 19% of their runs. Chiefs are dead last in the NFL, and by a wide margin, defending counter run concepts. The Chiefs have been dreadful defending shotgun runs, giving up over 5 yards a carry. Ravens use that frequently. Heavy formations have given the Chiefs defense relative problems. Play action has made the Chiefs defense look like a unit you'd be shocked to hear anybody talk about positively. And so I think those are the things that you're going to see Todd Monken and Lamar Jackson spam here. Lamar is throwing with play action at a very high rate this season relative to some other years. 2nd highest rate among 38 qualifying quarterbacks. The Ravens are top 5 in the NFL in EPA and success rate when throwing with play action. And when you specifically use it against the Chiefs on early downs, they're 30th in success rate allowed. When you don't use play action against the Chiefs, they're number 2 in completion rate allowed, 6th in EPA per pass allowed. So Monken has to have Lamar spam play action passes. You mentioned Lamar's legs and how it's a little bit different variation from Josh Allen, but both get the job done, right? So, like, how healthy is Willie Gay? He is a freak athlete with speed. The play he made in open space on James Cook last week is just unreal to watch. But he went down, left the game with a neck injury, and as soon as he did, that's when Josh Allen's legs became a massive factor. I think Willie Gay goes. How healthy? How long is he going to play when he meets the first lineman or fullback in the hole? Right? And so I think Willie Gay is a massive need against Lamar Jackson. To me, there's a lot of paths here to where the Chiefs' defense just doesn't look as good as their season-long surface numbers here, Todd.
One injury I do want to ask you about. Mark Andrews, we saw in practice all last week for the Ravens, was officially ruled out. And when you look at some of the comments there, does his contributions change anything that the Ravens can do? I mean, Isaiah Likely is filled in. I know he's not Andrews, but Isaiah Likely isn't exactly a poor man's tight end for what the Ravens want to try and go out there and accomplish. I mean, I know he's a guy you've been higher on than most, going all the way back since they drafted him out of Coastal.
More athletic. Obviously, you'd love to have 100% Mark Andrews. If you have 100% Mark Andrews out here, 3.5 is light. So I just think at this point, the line is the line, and whatever Mark Andrews gives you is just a bonus. And that's I think how everyone is viewing it perceptually.
It's a fair
the one thing with the injury report, and I don't think a lot of people know this. So like last week, for instance, we kind of said it in passing, like, hey, we really like tight ends against the Texans, whoever it is. Like, we just left it as whoever it is, right? But you start to watch some of the video that surfaced of Mark Andrews last week, and it was like, You ever see the movie Lionheart?
A long time ago.
Okay. And they're trying to get Jean-Claude Van Damme to accept this fight with Attila, and they show the video of like Attila getting like pounded, and then suddenly the video shuts off as he's about to decimate his opponent. If you watched Mark Andrews' videos last week, they all got filmed, right? Of like trotting to the huddle, trotting to whatever the unit, the tight end group was about to do, and then all of a sudden, as he was about to make the act, the video just stopped. And so
it might be a technological glitch, Payne. It may not be anything calculated by folks close to the Ravens organization. It could just be a pure technological glitch.
And so, you know, what we find out through the grapevine is like, whatever you ask a player to do, if he executes it, it becomes a full practice. So if we have like, hey, Mark Andrews, go trot over to that tight end station here, we're blocking, and he does it.
Go get me a water bottle, Mark.
Right. It's a full practice. So like, I don't know what we're getting from Mark Andrews here. I think if you're looking to the Ravens, you're just thinking about it as a bonus.
Yeah, for sure. Right. It's another potential red zone option, and you feel that they can lean on him, but you can't anticipate that he's going to get a full workload like he would if it was week 1 of the season. No, I understand completely with what you're saying and where you're coming from there. You can follow Payne on X at Payne Insider. I'm Todd Fuhrman. You, of course, can follow me there as well. Most importantly, for all things Bet the Board, be sure to follow the podcast at Bet the Board Pod. And Payne, we know you're getting excited with NASCAR season right around the corner. We'll be back with a fresh season of Stay Green just in time for the Busch Clash to come during the Super Bowl bye week. So we will hopefully
I've been chomping at the bit for the Busch Clash.
I figure you've been chomping at the Busch.
No idea.
I mean, it was just
I haven't been able to sleep for weeks.
It was just like Phoenix and crowning a NASCAR Series champion in early November was yesterday, and you've been waiting for the cars to get back on track. So hard for you to contain your excitement, and I appreciate your enthusiasm and optimism about yet another season of Stay Green that'll launch next week. But one other game to get to, and that, of course, the nightcap out in the Bay.
There is one other. That's good. You didn't forget about half the slate.
Well, I mean, if you want, I can just gloss over this one and we can shut it down at 37 minutes. The 49ers, a full touchdown favorite. You alluded to the fact that the over has taken money early on what day is it? Thursday. We've seen the 51s turn into 51.5s and some of the sharpest shops all the way out to 52. First quarterback matchup in playoff history, Payne, between the first overall pick and the last pick of the NFL draft. The Lions, one of 4 teams trying to end their Super Bowl drought, have not made an appearance in the modern era, much like the Houston Texans, Jacksonville Jaguars, and the Cleveland Browns. They bring the longest road playoff losing streak, 11 all-time, into the matchup on Sunday afternoon. The last win on the road coming in 1957 against the 49ers. The Lions, they spent a lot of time playing on the artificial stuff over the last couple months of the season. This will be just their second outdoor game since they played the Baltimore Ravens way back on October 22nd. They played the Chicago Bears. We know how that game ended. Detroit looked ill-equipped to do much of anything. Weather, though, should not play a major role in this particular contest. And Payne, when we look at Detroit, they deserve full marks. You mentioned Ben Johnson and how his name has been attached to other jobs. The Lions offense has really carried this group, and they've done it with diversity. Second team all-time with 4 players that have 10 touchdowns, joining the 2013 Denver Broncos. Most touchdowns by rookies. Jared Goff, a full resurrection and reclamation project that he's become against a 49ers defense that wants to pin their ears back, come after you, but did show a little bit of weakness against the run like you assume they could, and Aaron Jones having some success, even if the lion's share of his yardage came on one explosive play.
Did you just say Jared Goff went 12 to midnight? Is that you used a word in there that I don't think is appropriate for
the reclamation project?
Podcasting. Erection? You said?
Reclamation project. I didn't say erection.
Oh, resurrection is what you said. Okay. Resurrection.
Resurrected his career, a reclamation project. There's a number of different ways that can go, but erection was not one of them.
What do you make of this game? I want to hear your thoughts. What are your like?
That I think everybody.
I don't want to keep coming on here and like shitting on the Lions.
You don't have to come in here and shit on the Lions. The biggest question I have for the Lions is if they find themselves down because that secondary leaves a lot to be desired and they have to abandon the run. Can Jared Goff beat you in known passing situations?
So, like, let me look at this where we have these guys updated right now. Like, they haven't moved. Remember the conversation we had as they went to Baltimore? And we're like, the top 7 teams are the top 7 teams. You're never getting in there. They're never getting in there. That's where, like,
you're not getting into the Boys Club, whether you want to or not. You're not getting in there.
Right? And it's like the reason pro bettors were actually gravitating towards the lines here is because the division was dog shit. And then eventually, like, the schedule down the stretch was dog shit. And you were going to be able to face, I want to call them good. Like, I guess I would say above average teams at home, in the dome, in front of like a raucous crowd. And thank God you had that crowd. Because there you are against, Tampa Bay team tied at 17 going into the fourth quarter. And Jamel Dean drops a pick in the end zone. You get points on that. Finally, guys start getting injured in the Tampa defense to where like the offense looks like it can actually move the ball. It's a very difficult team to gauge. Now, I will say this. Unlike the Buccaneers, had they beat Detroit last week, there weren't any paths for Tampa to actually have a shot at beating the 49ers. There's at least some paths for Detroit to have success, right? And again, and if you listened last week, it'll sound repetitive, but very similar to last week, outside zone runs. Just replace Aaron Jones with Jahmyr Gibbs with the outside zone, and I know that became like a talking point for everyone late in the week.
Wonder where they got that from.
On the surface, though, Aaron Jones appears to have had a monster day, right? 18 carries, 108 yards, 6 yards carry. 53 of that was on one carry during a drive, which didn't yield points for the Packers. Aaron Jones' other 17 carries averaged 3.2 yards a rush. On top of outside zone runs, pull lead concepts worked very well for the Packers against the 49ers last week. Lions used that run type at the 5th highest rate in the league. Gibbs has been uber efficient. Gains 3+ yards before ever being contacted on 42% of those pull lead runs. Now, the injuries inside for the Lions offense are certainly worth discussing. Frank Ragnow, arguably the best center. He is going to play through injuries. He's just tough as nails. Playing through a left ankle and a left knee issue. My understanding is he'll probably need some work done after the season is over. He's going to be going against Hargrave and Armstead on the inside. Armstead is going to be healthier than he was a week ago. He's going to have more on his plate this week in terms of snap share. That's a pretty dynamic duo to face at less than 100%. Jonah Jackson, starting guard for the Lions, out. His replacement, Coyote Owosika. He allowed a pressure on 25% of his pass blocking snaps last week. On the season, Owosika has allowed 14% pressure rate on late down passing block snaps. He's an issue. The 49ers defense, which we had told people coming into the season was going to regress some. However, we started to find some real improvement in certain areas late in the season that led us to believe the Packers offense wouldn't have much success last week. And I know if you look at the final score or watched that game throughout, the Packers were clearly, air quotes, the right side. The Packers offense didn't really do much, right? You remove the explosive Aaron Jones run. You remove the 38-yard throw to Dobbs when Ward slipped and fell on the outcut.
Which, by the way,
Packers
49ers, it's your home surface. How do you not have the right cleats? How are you the one slipping down time and time again on your own home surface? Which leaves me to scratch my head quite a bit when I was watching that game, at least through the first half. But go ahead.
Yeah, they finally made the adjustment at halftime. But you just look in totality, you remove those two plays. Packers averaged 3.9 yards per play on their other 60 snaps. The final 25 minutes, the 49ers defense was lights out. And you start to look at some of the matchups in this game. Yes, the Lions should be able to run it somewhat here, right? The 49ers defense, top 5 against heavy personnel. So we mentioned that last week, that what the Packers implemented against Dallas the week prior and Dan Quinn wouldn't work here. And so suddenly they're going to go three wide sets. The adjustment we outlined the 49ers made in their secondary with moving Lenore into the slot and Arbery Thomas outside. Thomas certainly, panicked a little bit, and you got the pass interference call. right? Which led to points on 3rd and a mile. You got the kickoff return and then recovered the fumble, which led to points for the Packers. So it's like, if the Lions come out here in 3 wide, the 49ers have been very good defending that post-bye, right? With the adjustments they made to personnel, with the adjustments they made in coaching going less blitz heavy. And, you look at Goff specifically, it doesn't necessarily need to be weather, but you get them off that fast turf track in Detroit. They're a little bit different on grass, something we see very much with Dallas in recent years, right? It's not necessarily like indoors, outdoors, and certainly weather is massive, right? That's the obvious, but it's like the surface plays a role as well on why Detroit and Goff just haven't been as good outdoors. Nearly 60% of Goff's passes come between the numbers. When you think about who's in the middle there.
Yeah, I'm not sure I'd want to be throwing at Warner and Greenlaw all that often if I didn't have to.
Yeah, the ultimate eraser in the middle of that field is the 49ers. They are elite defending passes in that area. So again, like on paper, there's paths, right? Running the ball with specific types. Everyone likes the running dog, outside zone, pull lead concept. Sure. Fire up play action, right? This is something we know Detroit loves to do. And since week 14, yes, small sample size, just 5 games, but the 49ers, shockingly, have been the most sensitive defense to play action in the NFL over that stretch. So there's paths here, unlike the Buccaneers would have had. I just don't see an offensive explosion for the Lions, right? They're going to have to play perfect. They're going to have to spam all of these intricate areas of where the 49ers are vulnerable, and that's tough to do. And I'm not saying Ben Johnson isn't 100% committed. But when you're taking interviews, you're accepting other jobs, we know 100% of your focus isn't necessarily on just this. So I think the Lions are going to have some relative success offensively. I just don't think if you again look at surface level numbers, it's going to yield quite what you would expect from Detroit's offense here.
One final thing I'll put on to put a bow on the 49ers defense is coming out of that 24-21 win against Green Bay. We know Brock Purdy, who we'll get to in a moment, drew a ton of criticism, but when you look at the numbers, statistically for Jordan Love, it was his lowest passing yardage, quarterback rating, and completion percentage since he started to get hot back in week 10. His 42% passing success rate, Payne, was 8 percentage points lower than what it was cumulatively from weeks 10 to week 18, and a down-to-down basis. To your point, there wasn't that big play potential, so if you back out those explosive plays, I know the stats tell you one thing, there was a lot to be desired from a Green Bay offense that had been operating at a very high level, that Detroit, if they can't hit those explosives because they don't get defenders to fall down, can they be methodical enough to move the ball? Because when you look at Detroit's defense, they've given up explosives, and they've done so in spades to elite wide receivers. Mike Evans last week had a huge day. The week before, Puka Nacua went for almost 200 yards, and in steps a 49ers offense that, with or without Deebo Samuel, still has other weapons. But when you look at the 49ers, I don't want to oversimplify their path. You'd like to think that Kyle Shanahan was going to be smart enough not to bang his head into a brick wall, and instead of looking to lean on the ground game to open up the passing attack, you get Brock Purdy going early, you let him stretch the field some, and once the passing game starts humming, then it can become an opportunity for Christian McCaffrey to do what Rachaad White, Chase Edmonds, and even Kyron Williams were able to do against this Lions run defense.
So, yes, I agree. Everything. I think the better starting point to this conversation is Brock Purdy. And the one thing we try to do a good job at is not going narrative-based and not doing the hot take stuff. And so right now, if you go back in time and hop on social media, people were clamoring for Brock Purdy to be benched last week. You have Ryan Clark going on whatever show he's on. I'm seeing it in my reels and stuff on social media, saying how he made it sick to his stomach. He had to talk about Brock Purdy in the same sentences of Josh Allen and Lamar Jackson and Mahomes. I think there's also another narrative out there, Todd, that he's not trusted by Shanahan. And the numbers are the numbers. It shocks me that that's what's going on out there, that's what's being said, because we told you last week, look at Brock Purdy's throw rates on early downs. Look at the distance of throw on early downs, all substantially higher than Jimmy G. He threw the most attempts of the entire season last week in conditions that were not ideal. How does that depict Kyle Shanahan not having trust in him?
And on top of that, Payne, it wasn't like they were chasing major deficits. It was a neutral game state for the majority of that contest.
Against a defense that's vulnerable to the run.
Joe Barry did sell out to try and stop the run.
He
made
did.
Joe Barry find another opportunity since the Packers have since parted ways. But they at least knew
that was his job was on the line. He was up every single hour of the day crafting game plans for the line at 3 or 4 weeks, and he was coming up with good shit. I mean, he knew his job was on the line.
He did a great job with it. He goes, you know what? If the 49ers are going to beat me, it's not because Christian McCaffrey is going absolutely nuclear against my leaky run defense.
Yeah. So you put all of the Brock Purdy narratives to the side, and then also think about that game. Weather, right? Weather. Game plan clearly was to get Debo involved early, as he is the focal point most weeks against zone-heavy defenses, which the Packers were. Suddenly what you've schemed up all week, it's removed on the first possession. And then you throw the rain into the mix, and it's a thing, right? Brock Purdy's got small hands. I think he's got 9 and a 1/4 hand size. It the average size, based upon the combine is 9 3/4. So, it's a thing when they talked about him throwing with a glove during the week. Then all of a sudden he comes out, first possession, glove, gets ditched, no glove. You have all of the cameras zooming in. Purdy's drying his hands post-snap before he's throwing it. So it was a thing. So you had the worst possible elements to gauge Brock Purdy on. Whether the key cog of the scheme being removed, a deficit. Now you look at this week, everything's fucking perfect. I mean, the weather, 4 mile per hour winds. It's perfect. You're getting the Lions
65
defense.
and sunny, baby.
Yeah. I mean, you're getting the Lions defense 28th since week 15 in EPA allowed per drop back. I think you want to give a middle finger to everybody this week, and you're having Purdy throwing early and often. You're having him push the ball early down the field, attack deep. You mentioned, we all know the Lions defense has given up explosives. Lions have allowed 31% of the passes defended to travel 10-plus yards. I mean, they are an absolute sieve. I think you are going to fire up Kittle. We know the Lions have struggled mightily against tight ends, so you have a great matchup there. Ayuk on the outside, great matchup there. The Lions have struggled defending outside receivers. What do we make of Deebo Samuel? I know Dr. Chow is certainly thinking he plays. I would say he's the most confident that he plays. It's a shoulder injury to the opposite side, and it's not as large of an issue as it was last week. I think he suits up. I don't know what impact he has on the game. Even if he's out there for 20 snaps as a decoy, I think it's beneficial. But my point in this is no one knows except the 49ers. And the 49ers this week are going to install a game plan that is either going to have whatever version of Deebo is available is what the game plan is going to be, relative to last week where Deebo was the game plan and suddenly he was removed from it. And you had to kind of adjust on the fly.
And with a full week, too, they may come up with 2 game plans and see how Deebo's shoulder feels going, hey, look, this is the desired path, but if Deebo can't go, we at least have an alternative to go to should Deebo be ruled out of the game, or they can only use him as a decoy, to your point.
These are typically spots where good offenses show well. And so you look at kind of the reconstruction of the playoffs. You think about how important some of these buys are, and they are. But you look at the last 8 teams that have had the first round bye. When they show up for the divisional weekend, they have come short of their lined team total by an average of 3 points. The week after the divisional round, they get to the conference championship, they've exceeded their team total by an average of 3 points. So there is very much something there to the time off. And we know it wasn't just a bye, right? Brock Purdy didn't play week 18. A lot of those guys didn't play week 18. We are going to see a vastly different throw game from the 49ers and Brock Purdy in perfect weather conditions. And so I think that success is why you are seeing the 49ers take a little bit more money again today. You're seeing some of the shops gravitate towards 7.5. A lot of shops open 6.5. So this has been a nice move. You're also seeing the total initially got, some places open 50.5. The places that open 52.5 got hit under, 52 got hit under. But now that we are at this key of 51, and you're waking up here Thursday morning as we record, limits pretty sizable. 51 a key number. We're now seeing that push out a little bit, and I think it's more game state potentially with the 49ers coming out and throwing, and I think that's the right path to attack the Lions. I mean, I know Kyle Shanahan again last week. You think about what they had to overcome. One of the most perfect situations you can have, Todd. You're going to bookend possessions. End the half with the possession. Start the half with the possession.
I don't know what
they got zero.
I don't know what
like,
the hell that was at the end of the first half.
We, none of us do. And this is Kyle Shanahan and nuts. It's his one deficiency. It's the same thing with Sean McVay. For two young guys who are all about offense, they've got something in their gut that just doesn't make them do certain things aggressively. And it's wild to watch. But we all saw how horrific it was, right? But in general, you got 0 points from those two bookend possessions. You still were able to overcome it with everything going against you. Weather, Debo going down, right? A little bit rusty from having, 2-3 weeks off. So I think this offense in terms of the throw game looks much different this week.
One last question I want to ask you about, because when we talk about the Lions, we know that secondary has been extremely vulnerable. You rattled off some ridiculous stats in terms of how prone they've been to the big play, but we've seen Aiden Hutchinson really start to provide pressure off the edge, most likely going to be matched up with Colton McKivitz. If you're the 49ers, do you run directly at him? Do you chip? How do you make sure on that side of the line that Hutchinson can't be a game wrecker? Because you obviously have a ton of confidence on the other side that Trent Williams is going to do what he does every single Sunday throughout the fall.
Yeah, I mean, you got a plan. Well, Jesus Christ, we're out to 8. Jesus, there is some money coming in here more on the 49ers. I think you're strategically coming up with things. Is it chips? Are you putting more tight ends on the field? Are you going heavy formation? I mean, there's things you can do. I don't really want to keep crapping on the Lions here, and certainly the best part of the Lions defense is its line, right? And it's no shock that Aiden Hutchinson is coming on more when Aleem McNeil returns, and you can't focus more on Hutchinson, right? You got to also pay attention to Aleem McNeil, and I think people know my thoughts on the 49ers offensive line. It's an all-world tackle, one of the best to ever do it, in Trent Williams and 4 pylons. So that is very much the same area. If Detroit's going to have some semblance of resistance defensively, that D-line has to own. They have to eat. But I get the vibe with the scheme, with getting the ball out quickly, being able to attack downfield is really something Brock Purdy is going to have success doing here. Now, certainly, right, Hutchinson's got to be a game wrecker here and negate that advantage, but I don't know. I don't think this is the metrics for Detroit's pass rush are very hit or miss. Let's just put it that way. If you look at like certain metrics, like, hey, but they don't really get home. Then you look at other ones, like, okay, they get home. Some of their pressure doesn't necessarily look like the pass rush win rate stuff, right? They seem to be getting more pressure than you would think based upon win rates. So it's very difficult and seems not completely predictive week to week. And I think we've had a little bit of a difficult time assessing how good that pass rush of the Lions is. But obviously, Aiden Hutchinson takes another step when he's not the focal point with Aleem McNeil back in the middle, which is huge for the Lions. I got you on mute again.
I mean, I
did it again.
This is clockwork. I was going to call you out, but I just sit here.
I'm doing so many other things right now. Okay. I just said I answered your question about Aiden Hutchinson.
Right.
Yeah, hopefully he has a good
All
day.
right. You can follow Payne on X at Payne Insider. I'm Todd Fuhrman. I'm going to have to go back and listen to the podcast myself since I can only hear about 62% of it when Payne elects to hit the mute button. We talk about the best bet. Last week we didn't have a true best bet by normal bet the board definition, but plenty of actionable components for our listeners that were reading between the tea leaves could figure out where we've kind of tipped our hand.
It wasn't even tea leaves. They were direct. If you could get the Chiefs +3, awesome. You can't give out, one-off South Point numbers.
Well, some people do.
One-off. Yeah, that's true. You can't give all one-off gone numbers. I said earlier, all of the state of Florida, if you were dealing hard rock, you get Chiefs 3 -15, right? If you could probably get, and this is no joke, I would say 5 or 6 different times throughout the course of the week, South Point went to 3 flat on the Chiefs.
Yeah, it didn't last long, but it was there if you were sitting at the screen.
I mean,
for sure.
You could have effectively got down middle 5 figures had you popped them every single time they went to 3 flat.
You could have walked in. You could have walked in there too. To their credit, they'll take bigger limits over the counter. They just won't take a whole heck of a lot on the app.
Of course. So it's you can't do that. So that was if you could find 3 -15 flat, right? Chiefs are a good bet. That's mechanical. It's not very difficult. Very much what I said at the top of the show.
Yep.
We didn't want to give out a 7-point -140 teaser, but I'm sure we insinuated that's a bet we're probably making on our own. Our favorite bet of the week was the Rashad White under rush attempts. He had 9. I mean, cleared it by a long mile. So there was a lot of actionable information, just nothing we were going to pad our records with. And listen, I'll reiterate what I said at the top. It's always much easier to win for yourself than it is for others. I mean, think about the absolute mess ESPN Bet put themselves in last week, where every single pro bettor could line up with good limits. Shocking. Probably the best limits they'll ever be provided at ESPN Bet.
What an epic debacle from a bookmaking standpoint last week for them.
I mean, you could lay 9.5 plus 110 for sizable money. You can't give it out to anybody. Now it goes on to win. You can't get because the sharpest shops in the world are dealing 10 flat. Literally, you could retire in this business laying 9.5 plus 10 when the sharpest shops in the world are giving you 10 flat. So there's so many other things, and I'll just be candid, right? It's obvious. I'm not going to lie to you. We're on the Ravens this week, right? We've bet a ton of money line in the Ravens, first half and full. Those prices are substantially different than current market. So I'm not trying to have you run out there and take, the third number here. The 49ers. My hope was that Debo would get announced out, and this game was going to go to 5.5, and I could lay the 49ers.
Market this morning on Thursday tells you that ain't going to happen.
That ain't happening. So, I mean, it's very difficult. I mean, I'll probably give out some information here that my guys are not going to be happy with. But ideally, right, Debo gets announced in, he's more of a decoy, and that causes the Kittle props just to manually decrease because Debo is back, and we'll be looking at some Kittle props. I mean, the Willie Gay thing, I think he plays, but, somehow he gets announced out, right? You're probably looking more Lamar attempts at that point because the rushing yards, my guess is you're going to see a massive move. We've already seen some move, Lamar rushing numbers, right? Open 60.5. You're at mid 60s now by the time that game kicks off, right? You're probably going to be in the low 70s, I would guess. Yeah, but you kind of have to just be operational there in terms of what is Willie Gay doing here? That's kind of where I'm at. There isn't a best bet here.
No, not what the market is currently offering up.
Yeah.
So that's the name of the game. Look, we're here to give you stuff that we can bet that's widely available for our listeners.
Really sharp. I mean, I think the thought process on Kyle Shanahan's never getting away from the run game. ever. Like he's going to run the ball here. But he's probably going to throw a little bit more depending game state. Right? So, if we don't have a sportsbook sponsor, so I'll say it. Like if you have some sharp local accounts that are tied to like Metallic, they offer first half props on game day. So when those open, you're probably looking at some throwing props there for Brock Purdy. Christian McCaffrey's rushing attempts number at one point yesterday reached 20.5. He's exceeded that 4 fucking times all season. I don't know how you get to that number. And, he had 2 or 3 weeks off and, he's getting a Robert Kraft-like massage over there on the sidelines for his thigh the entire
A little
game.
bit more Theragun going on there than what we'd see with Robert Kraft.
Yeah, minus the Asian lady with pointy nipples. It was very much close.
Christ almighty. We've done a great job all season. If this is the final episode that we record, you guys are on your own for Super Bowl. There's paths where you're getting other guys involved because just 20.5 was a number that you had to just bet and you let whatever happen. Name of the game. You grab the best numbers that are out there based on game state. Look, every single bet you make isn't going to win, but if you make enough good bets over the long haul, you're going to win 55 to 60% in an inefficient prop market where you can get a little bit of an edge over the bookmaker.
I'm intrigued to see if these guys, start to leak a little bit more Ravens money into the market. We are out to 4. My feeling is, right, the reason, we went money line very early in the week was, had these bettors, pummeled the Ravens to a point where it got to 4.5 and had, the injury report looked really, really good for the Chiefs. Maybe you're playing that middle, right? You're coming back and your main position still the Ravens, but you're going to dabble some, Chiefs at plus 4.5 and play that large middle. But to this point, there really haven't been a thought or a conversation coming back on the Chiefs. Now, maybe that number gets a little nutty. Who knows? But yeah, there isn't anything necessarily here. If you had to be an absolute raving degenerate and make
these always scare me.
A horrific mechanical bet, relative to a professional bettor's acumen. And saying that as a recreational bettor looking for,
oh no,
some action as a hobby.
Choose your words
right?
wisely over there, sunshine.
You've probably made worse bets than a Ravens money line to 49ers money line parlay. At least you're directionally right on the sharp sides of the game. Yeah, I don't really know. I was trying to provide some actionable stuff here. I probably shouldn't have presented it in that manner, but and most guys are using their $50 bet for action and trying to spread it out with their money blind parlays. Again, mechanically, this is not a good bet, but you've probably found yourself doing that on sides that weren't actually sharp in your past betting history, and both the Ravens and the 49ers are the sharp sides here. So you probably made worse bets as a recreational bettor looking to treat this as a hobby than that angle this week as well.
Very fair assessment in all regards.
Let's get on it.
I anything else you'd like to get off your chest? Because that was a nice rant, and I didn't really anticipate it in any capacity for the last 3 or 4 minutes. Guy gets on mute, got to answer some text messages, comes back choosing violence on a Thursday morning before conference championship Thursdays.
I always love the questions of, can the Lions' best pass rusher get pressure this week? I got no fucking idea.
He better. These are the questions I have to ask.
They're gonna lose by 2 scores.
These are the hard-hitting questions I have to ask sitting in the host chair. It's not hot takey. I have to ask since it's going to be asked in a variety of different ways across other media outlets throughout the course of build-up to the game.
The key to these games is the best players for those teams
have to make the best plays
really well. Yeah, it's like, that's a key here to success this weekend is the best players playing like the best players.
It's a novel concept, although, look, last week the key to the Chiefs' success was Marquez Valdez-Scantling. So sometimes you get those role players stepping up to make those dynamic plays.
He did make 2 very good catches. He did bobble both, but they were good catches. That was not the key.
He made plays. Stephon Diggs didn't on the other side. MVS greater than Stephon Diggs, and that's what led to the Chiefs getting out of frigid Buffalo with a win, despite not having hot water, despite their players getting pelted with snowballs and ice, and the fact that the Chiefs are moving on for another road game in hostile territory yet again against a Baltimore Ravens side with one of the more underrated home field advantages in the AFC. So there we go.
It's a vastly different home field advantage. Can I be honest with you?
You were underwhelmed by Buffalo?
I didn't hear anything obviously this is going to sound really stupid, but now with technology, you have all of the sound guys.
I mean, look, I figured you had your own sound guy there on the sidelines. You had your own sideline guy there. You had somebody climbing up the goalpost, but
Billy had a couple guys there. So the 2 reports I got back were a little windier than we initially expected. But the crowd was it was just non-existent. It's going to be vastly different in Baltimore this week.
They will be ready to roll. There is no doubt about it. They've waited a long time to host an AFC Championship game, the first time in franchise history. 49ers fans, I'm sure, will want to punch their ticket knowing that they want to exact some measure of revenge should they get an opportunity to play the Ravens in Vegas 2 weeks from Sunday, but that's why they play the games. If we knew the outcomes before they kicked off, 99% of social media believes that the winners are already predetermined. Look, we wouldn't be doing what we'd be doing, and it'd be a lot easier.
Is that a thing?
I mean, look, you've seen all the conspiracy talk already about how the league wants Taylor Swift, that, the other, the officials, every other dynamic that's there.
The least amount
you spend more time on Instagram than anybody.
On social media for a guy that owns a business that operates.
You spend more time on Instagram than anybody I know. Don't lie.
Stop it.
Don't lie. On that note, thank you for everyone who's tuned in throughout the course of the playoffs. We will let you know exactly the day that the Super Bowl podcast is scheduled to drop. Still working through some of those details, maybe a little bit earlier than what you've anticipated, pending matchups and some of the numbers that are available. But that's even more reason that you need to follow the Bet the Board podcast on X at Bet the Board Pod. Like I said, NASCAR kicks off in earnest next week for those folks who are looking to try and put a little powder to good use during the bye week with the Busch Clash, and we will continue to keep this train on the tracks from now until Super Bowl Sunday, a few short weeks from now. Anything else you would like to share before we get out of Dodge?
Most people count sheep. I'm just going to be counting Busch cans in my sleep, just chomping at the bit, ready for that race.
Here we go.
You going to give me a matchup or two?
I'd give you an outright, but I know you don't like those. We already bet an outright. You want one of those?
They're the worst bet ever. Yeah, yes. Unless it's,
Nah, I probably won't give it to you then. And now that you're going to preface it that, we'll find a matchup or two. We'll pass it along.
I need a matchup. All right, let's get a matchup.
All right, we'll get you a matchup or two. All right.
Yeah, that's the mandate. I need
a mandate.
Over under. On average, 1.5 matchups per week.
We can work on that for bettable tracks.
Okay.
The unfortunate part, this way the schedule lays out.
This is what I'm hearing. You can't bet NASCAR anymore.
I'm saying, they've
6 months.
They've changed the schedule. So, after the Clash, we won't have a bettable race for another month. Daytona is great to watch. Doesn't mean there's an opportunity to bet it. And the same thing with Atlanta. But I go off on tangents. If you're looking for cars on track, we'll have you covered next week. We'll bring back Chris as well for another great season.
Looking for wheels on an oval. We got you covered.
Look, that money can be just as green at the wagering window as pounding kiosks across the continental United States can be when it comes to trying to achieve profit. So
until they remove them.
Yeah, well, that's maybe the next step somewhere in the evolution that's there. You just get better masks, you better disguises, and better sunglasses to go to the window to try and play the beard game as needed. Best of luck to all of you, our loyal Bet the Board listeners, for whatever investments you choose to make for Conference Championship Sunday. And most importantly, with a few tickets in your portfolio, we'll see you at the window.
We hope you enjoyed listening to this episode of Bet the Board. Make sure you follow Todd and Payne on X. Todd is at Todd Fuhrman. That's TODDFUHRMAN. And Payne is at Payne Insider. That's PAYNEINSIDER. Don't forget, our weekly newsletter comes with an additional best bet. Have that delivered to your inbox by clicking the link atop the podcast show notes. And most importantly, subscribe and download Bet the Board. We're on Apple, Spotify, Amazon Wondery, YouTube, Google Podcasts, and all your other major platforms.